You were quiet for 7 years, Simone. Don't ruin the only thing you were ever good at. Bradley Mercer said it softly, almost kindly, but every person in that glass-walled conference room heard him. The words landed harder than a slap, because he smiled when he said them. Simone Whitaker stood at the far end of the long walnut table with her hands still on the back of an empty chair, her black coat folded over one arm, her old leather purse hanging from her shoulder. Behind Bradley, Chicago stretched out 47 floors below, all steel, river light, and morning traffic. Inside the room, everything smelled like fresh coffee, expensive cologne, and polished money. Lawyers sat with their tablets open. 2 board members whispered near the windows. A woman from public relations adjusted a camera on a tripod, pretending not to watch Simone's face. And beside Bradley, his fiancée, Lauren Vale, crossed one perfect leg over the other and gave Simone the kind of smile women use when they think another woman has already lost. Simone did not answer. She only looked at Bradley, the same white man who once promised to build a life with her in a one-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat, back when his suits came from a clearance rack and his dreams still had her fingerprints all over them. Now he wore a custom gray suit, a gold watch, and the confidence of a man who believed history could be edited if he paid the right people. "Let's not make this emotional," Bradley said, sliding a thick folder toward the empty seat across from him. "This is a final settlement meeting. We sign, we move forward, and everyone gets peace." Peace. Simone almost laughed, but the sound never made it out of her throat. Peace was what he called 7 years of missed birthdays, canceled weekends, and interviews where he called himself a devoted father. Peace was what he called taking her work, removing her name, and telling the world he built Mercer Group alone. Peace was what he wanted now because the company was close to going public, and he needed his past to sit still, look grateful, and disappear on command. Lauren leaned forward, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Honestly, Simone, this could be good for everyone. Caleb gets to see his father respected. You get financial security. Bradley gets to protect what he built." Simone's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. For 1 second, she felt the old ache rise in her chest, the one that used to make her stay quiet because her son was small, because lawyers were expensive, because Bradley knew exactly how to make her look bitter before she even opened her mouth. But Caleb was 10 now, old enough to ask why his dad smiled at strangers on television but forgot school pickup, old enough to notice when adults lied gently, old enough to deserve the truth without being used as a prop. Bradley tapped the folder with 2 fingers. "It's simple. You sign the image rights agreement, confirm you won't challenge the company narrative, and agree not to interfere with media connected to Caleb. In return, I increase support." He paused, then added, "generously." A few people at the table looked down, embarrassed for her before she had even spoken. That was the part Bradley had always loved most, making the room feel sorry for Simone before he made the offer sound kind. She pulled out the chair and sat down slowly, not because he invited her to, but because she was done standing in rooms where he expected her to shrink. From her purse, she removed one thin cream-colored envelope and placed it on the table in front of her. No dramatic movement, no raised voice, just paper touching wood. Bradley glanced at it and smirked. "What's that? Another list of grievances?" Simone finally spoke, her voice quiet enough that everyone leaned in without meaning to. "No, Bradley. It's the reason you shouldn't have recorded this meeting." The PR woman froze beside the camera. Lauren's smile flickered. Bradley's eyes narrowed, but he recovered fast, leaning back like a man indulging a child. "You always did like making things sound bigger than they are." Simone looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 7 years, she saw fear trying to hide behind his polish. "And you always thought silence meant permission." The room went still. Bradley opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the conference room door clicked open behind Simone. A tall man in a navy suit stepped inside, carrying 3 sealed folders under one arm. Julian Cross did not hurry. Men with real power rarely did. He walked to Simone's side, placed the folders beside her envelope, and gave Bradley a calm nod. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Whitaker." Bradley's smirk disappeared so quickly it almost looked painful. Simone kept her hands folded on the table, steady now, while every person in the room began to understand that she had not come there to beg, sign, or be quiet. She had come there because Bradley had finally chosen the one meeting where silence would cost him everything. 7 years earlier, before the glass towers and board votes and polished lies, Bradley Mercer used to sit at a chipped kitchen table in a tiny apartment on the west side of Chicago, staring at numbers he did not understand until Simone made them make sense. The radiator hissed all winter, the neighbors upstairs argued almost every night, and the laundromat below made the floor hum like an old engine. Bradley called it temporary. Simone called it home, because back then she believed love could make even a hard place feel warm. She worked days at a consulting firm, came home with her feet aching, then stayed up past midnight helping Bradley build the first investor deck for what would become Mercer Group. He paced while she typed. He dreamed while she calculated. He sold the vision, but Simone gave it bones. "You are better at this than I am," he told her one night, rubbing his eyes as she rewrote his entire pitch in plain English. "Do not tell anybody," she said, smiling as she passed him the laptop. He leaned down, kissed the top of her head, and said, "One day, when this works, everyone will know what you did." She believed him. That was the painful part. At the first investor breakfast, Simone sat beside him in a navy dress she had bought on sale, holding a folder of notes he had asked her to prepare. When one investor challenged the revenue model, Bradley froze for half a second. Simone answered calmly, explaining the market, the pricing, the risk, and the growth plan. The room listened. The check came 3 weeks later. Bradley celebrated like a man who had touched the sky, lifting Simone in their kitchen while she laughed against his shoulder. But success did not make him grateful. It made him hungry. The apartment changed first, then the clothes, then the people around him. New advisors, new friends, new rooms where Simone was invited less and less. At first, Bradley said it was practical. "These meetings run late, baby. You need rest." Then it became image. Some of these people are old school. They expect a certain kind of presentation. Simone understood what he did not say. She understood how often rooms went quiet when a black woman spoke too clearly, too confidently, too much like she belonged there. Still, she tried to give him grace, because she loved the man she thought was still underneath the ambition. When Caleb was born, Bradley brought flowers to the hospital and cried when he held him. For one beautiful week, Simone thought the old Bradley had come back. Then the calls started again. The late nights. The interviews where he said, "I built this company from nothing," and never once said her name. One evening, with Caleb asleep against her chest, Simone watched Bradley on a business news segment from their living room. The host called him a self-made genius. Bradley smiled and accepted it like it was the truth. When he came home, Simone asked, "Why did you not mention me?" He loosened his tie and sighed like she had asked for something childish. "Because people do not want a marriage story, Simone. They want a founder story." She stared at him, the baby warm in her arms, and felt something inside her go very still. "So what am I in that story?" Bradley looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Right now, you are making this harder than it needs to be." That sentence became the first crack. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough for Simone to realize the man she had built beside was learning how to stand on top of her. Months later, during the divorce, Bradley's lawyers described her as supportive but uninvolved, a generous phrase that erased 5 years of unpaid labor. Simone wanted to scream. She wanted to open every email, every draft, every late-night message where Bradley begged for her help. But Caleb was 3, sitting outside the courtroom with a juice box and a toy dinosaur, asking when they could go home. So Simone swallowed the truth until it cut on the way down. She signed what she had to sign. She left with her son, 2 suitcases, and a blue USB hidden in the lining of her purse. Bradley thought she walked away with nothing because he had taken the house, the company, and the story. What he never understood was that Simone had kept the one thing he could not buy back once the world finally saw it. She had kept the beginning. After the divorce, Simone learned how quiet a home could be when nobody was coming to save you. Her new apartment in South Loop was on the 4th floor of a brick building with thin walls, a stubborn heater, and a kitchen so small she could open the refrigerator and touch the stove at the same time. Caleb was 3 then, still sleeping with one hand wrapped around the neck of his stuffed dinosaur, still asking why Daddy's house had stairs and a yard while their place had a parking lot view and a neighbor who played music too loud on Sundays. Simone never answered with bitterness. She packed his lunch, wiped jelly from his cheeks, and said, Some homes are bigger, sweetheart, but ours has everything we need. Then she would turn away before he could see her eyes fill. Money was tight in a way Bradley would never understand. Not movie poor. Real poor. The kind where Simone stood in the grocery aisle doing math in her head, choosing between fresh berries for Caleb and the laundry detergent they needed before Friday. She picked up freelance strategy work wherever she could find it, helping small bakeries fix their websites, writing business plans for hair salons, coaching first-time founders over video calls after Caleb fell asleep. Some nights, she worked at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning with a mug of cold coffee beside her and a blanket over her shoulders because turning the heat up cost money. The blue USB stayed hidden inside an old shoebox under her bed, tucked beneath tax forms, birthday cards, and a hospital bracelet from Caleb's birth. She did not look at it often. She did not need to. She knew what was on it. Emails, pitch drafts, founder notes. The first product roadmap Bradley claimed came to him in a flash of genius. Every so often, when a magazine published another glowing profile of him, Simone would pull the box halfway out, sit on the carpet, and rest her hand on the lid. Then Caleb would call from the other room, asking for water or help finding a missing sock, and she would push the box back into the dark. Her revenge could wait. Her son could not. As Caleb grew, the questions got harder. At 7, he came home from school with a folded paper in his backpack and a look on his face that was too old for him. "Mom," he asked, standing in the kitchen while she stirred pasta sauce, "is Dad famous because he is smarter than everybody?" Simone turned the burner down. "Why are you asking that?" Caleb shrugged. "A kid said my dad is a big deal, but he did not come to career day. He said maybe he was too busy for regular kids." Simone felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "Your father is busy, but that does not mean you are regular in a bad way. You are my favorite person in the whole world." Caleb looked down at his sneakers. "Am I his favorite person?" The spoon stopped moving in Simone's hand. For a second, she hated Bradley more than she had hated him in court. Not because he left her, but because he left his own child standing in a kitchen asking for proof of love. She knelt in front of Caleb and smoothed the collar of his school shirt. "You never have to earn being loved," she said. "Not by me. Not by anybody." That night, after Caleb fell asleep, Simone opened her laptop and started working on an idea she had buried for years. A platform for small businesses owned by women who were always told they were too small, too local, too quiet to matter. She named it Harbor Row because a harbor was where people came when the water got rough. What began as one spreadsheet became a pitch deck, then a waiting list, then a pilot program that helped 23 businesses in 3 months. Simone did not announce it with champagne or a rooftop party. She celebrated by buying Caleb waffles at a diner on Michigan Avenue and letting him order extra whipped cream. 6 months later, an email arrived from Whitaker Equity Partners asking for a meeting. Simone read it twice, then once more, afraid she had misunderstood. The attorney copied on the email was named Julian Cross. He wrote with the clean, careful tone of a man who did not waste words. "Ms. Whitaker, your work has reached the right people. We would like to discuss funding, ownership protection, and long-term control." Simone sat back in her chair, the apartment quiet around her, the shoebox still under the bed, the city glowing beyond the window. For the first time in years, she did not feel like the woman Bradley had erased. She felt like the woman he had underestimated. The first meeting with Julian Cross did not feel like a rescue. That was what made Simone trust him. He did not promise to destroy Bradley, did not lean across the table and sell her some shiny fantasy about justice arriving overnight. He met her in a quiet office near the river, listened more than he spoke, and reviewed every document she brought without changing expression. The blue USB sat between them like a small piece of weathered truth. Simone watched him plug it into a secure laptop, watched the screen glow against his glasses, watched his hand pause when the first old email opened. "He put this in writing?" Julian asked. Simone gave a tired smile. "Bradley used to think nobody mattered until he needed them." Julian read more. The pitch drafts. The ownership notes. The early investor messages where Bradley wrote, "Simone knows the model better than I do, let her answer." Then the later emails, colder, sharper, full of words like optics, founder image, and clean narrative. After nearly an hour, Julian closed the laptop and folded his hands. "Ms. Whitaker, this is not just personal history. This is leverage." Simone looked out at the river, moving slow below the window. I am not trying to burn his life down. I know, Julian said. That is why you should be the one holding the match. She turned back to him. For the first time, somebody powerful had not asked her to calm down, move on, or be reasonable for the comfort of the man who hurt her. He simply named what she already had. Over the next year, Harbor Row grew quietly. Whitaker Equity Partners invested, but Simone kept control. Julian made sure of it. She hired 3 women part-time, then 6. She moved from her kitchen table into a small office above a bookstore in Bronzeville. Caleb helped her carry in the first box of pens, grinning like they had bought a skyscraper. So you are the boss? He asked. Simone set a plant on the windowsill. Something like that. Good, he said. Bosses should bring snacks. She laughed so hard she nearly cried. Life did not become easy, but it became hers. Then, on a Friday afternoon in October, the email arrived. Simone was sitting in her car outside Caleb's school, rain tapping softly on the windshield, when her phone buzzed. The sender was Bradley's attorney. The subject line was cold enough to make her stomach tighten. Mandatory image rights and custody review meeting. She opened it and read slowly. Bradley wanted permission to use Caleb's name, photos, and selected family details in a media campaign tied to Mercer Group's public offering. The email called it a human-centered founder story. It said Bradley wished to highlight his role as an involved father. It said Simone's cooperation would preserve stability. Then came the sentence that made her hand go still. Failure to cooperate may require a review of existing custody arrangements. Simone looked through the rain at the school doors where children were beginning to spill out with backpacks and bright jackets. Her son was somewhere in that crowd, laughing, probably dragging his sneakers through puddles. Bradley had missed his last 3 weekends with Caleb. He had forgotten the science fair. He had sent a birthday gift 2 days late with his assistant's handwriting on the card. Now he wanted to borrow fatherhood like a suit for television. A second message came in before Simone could breathe. This one was from Lauren Vale. Do not make this embarrassing. Bradley has moved on. You should too. Simone stared at the words until they stopped hurting and started looking small. Caleb opened the passenger door a minute later, shaking rain from his curls. Mom, can we get tacos? He asked. Simone locked her phone and smiled at him. Yes, baby. We can get tacos. She drove 3 blocks before pulling into a quiet side street. Caleb was in the back seat telling her about a spelling test, his voice warm and ordinary, the sound of the life she had protected for 7 years. Simone waited until he finished, then picked up her phone and called Julian. When he answered, she did not cry. She did not explain from the beginning. She only said, I think it is time. Julian was silent for 1 beat, just long enough to understand everything. Then he said, send me the email, the message, and the meeting details. And Simone, yes. Bring the USB. She looked at Caleb in the rearview mirror, at his rain-damp hoodie and trusting face, and felt the old fear step back. Bradley thought he had sent an invitation. He had no idea he had opened a door. By the morning of the meeting, Bradley Mercer had turned a private family matter into a stage. He chose the largest conference room at Mercer Group, the one with glass walls, a skyline view, and a table long enough to make any visitor feel small before they even sat down. Fresh white flowers sat in the center, too perfect to smell real. A camera stood near the far wall because Bradley had told his public relations team they might capture a few moments for the company documentary. Road to IPO, they called it. A story about vision, grit, and leadership. Simone knew what that meant. He wanted a clean shot of his black ex-wife sitting quietly across from him, signing away her son's image while he looked generous and calm. He wanted the world to see forgiveness without ever showing what he had done to need it. Bradley arrived early, walking in with Lauren on his arm and 2 attorneys behind him. He looked rested, expensive, and pleased with himself. Lauren wore cream, the kind of dress that said she had never had to rush a child through rain to make school on time. She glanced at the camera, then at the chairs set aside for Simone. Maybe move her closer to the end, Lauren said to the public relations manager. It will look less confrontational. The woman hesitated. Bradley gave a small nod, and the chair was moved. That was how he had always done it. Never shouting, never leaving fingerprints. Just tiny adjustments that reminded Simone where he thought she belonged. When Simone stepped out of the elevator, the receptionist looked surprised, as if she had expected someone tired, messy, broken. Simone wore a simple black suit, low heels, and her hair pulled back neatly. Her purse was the same old leather one she had carried for years. Inside it, wrapped in a soft cloth, was the blue USB. In her other hand, she held a thin cream envelope. Julian had told her not to carry more than that. Let him believe you came light, he had said. So she did. The room quieted when she entered. Bradley stood with practiced warmth. Simone, thank you for being reasonable. She walked to the chair they had moved for her, looked at it, then pulled out the chair directly across from him and sat there instead. Lauren's smile tightened. One of the attorneys shifted in his seat. Bradley leaned over the table, lowering his voice as if he was doing her a favor. Take the money, sign the paper, and go back to whatever life you built after me. For a second, Simone heard the old version of him under the polished voice, the man who knew how to make cruelty sound like advice. Her hand rested on her purse. Her pulse was steady, but her throat felt dry. She thought of Caleb eating tacos in the back seat, talking about his spelling test while his father tried to turn him into a marketing angle. She thought of every time she had stayed quiet so her son could stay whole. Then she looked up at Bradley and said, "You still think I came here for your permission?" Bradley laughed, short and soft, like she had made a harmless joke. "You always did have a flair for drama." Lauren leaned back and crossed her arms. "This is exactly what we wanted to avoid." Simone did not look at her. She placed the cream envelope on the table and slid it forward with 2 fingers. Bradley glanced at it, but did not touch it. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked. Simone met his eyes. "A courtesy." The word changed the air, not because it was loud, but because it was calm. Bradley's smile held for another moment, then thinned at the edges. Behind Simone, the conference room door opened. Julian Cross walked in with 3 sealed folders and the relaxed silence of a man who had read every page before entering the room. He stopped beside Simone's chair and looked directly at Bradley. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "before anyone discusses image rights, we need to discuss ownership, authorship, and the reason this camera should remain exactly where it is." Bradley stared at Julian Cross as if the man had entered the wrong room. For a moment, nobody spoke. The camera light stayed on near the wall, a tiny red duck glowing over a table full of people who suddenly looked less certain of themselves. Lauren was the first to recover, or at least she tried to. "I am sorry," she said, her voice sweet with sharp edges, "but this is a family matter. I do not think we need another attorney turning it into a circus." Julian did not look at her. He set the 3 sealed folders beside Simone's envelope and removed a slim tablet from his briefcase. "Ms. Vale, this stopped being a family matter when Mercer Group requested image rights for a minor child in connection with an active public offering campaign." One of Bradley's attorneys cleared his throat. "Mr. Cross, we have not been properly introduced. Julian Cross, counsel for Simone Whitaker and special legal representative for Whitaker Equity Partners." The name moved through the room quietly, but it changed every face it touched. A board member near the window sat forward. The chief financial officer, who had been checking his phone, put it face down on the table. Bradley's jaw tightened. Whitaker Equity has no seat in this meeting. Julian opened the first folder. "Actually, they do. As of last Thursday, Whitaker Equity Partners acquired a controlling position in the convertible note package tied to your pre-public offering bridge financing. Under Section 14, any material dispute involving founder ownership, brand representation, or undisclosed intellectual property claims requires written clearance before the offering proceeds." He turned one page and slid it toward the center of the table. "That clearance now runs through Ms. Whitaker." The room went so still Simone could hear the soft buzz of the lights above them. Bradley looked at the paper, then at Simone, and for the first time that morning, his expression did not know where to land. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "This is ridiculous. Simone does not understand venture structures." Simone folded her hands on the table. "I understood them when I built yours." The words were quiet, but they did exactly what shouting never could. They made people listen. Bradley's face flushed. "You helped with some early notes. Do not rewrite history." Julian opened the second folder. "We are not rewriting history. We are restoring the original draft." He connected his tablet to the room screen. A document appeared, dated 8 years earlier. Mercer Group Launch Model, Draft 1. Author, Simone Whitaker. The public relations manager looked at the camera, then back at the screen, unsure whether stopping the recording would make things better or worse. Julian clicked again. Email after email appeared. Bradley asking Simone to revise the investor deck. Bradley telling a partner that Simone knew the model better than he did. Bradley forwarding her work to advisors with his name placed at the top 2 days later. Bradley leaned across the table. Private marital communications are not company records. Julian did not blink. They became company records when you used them to raise capital. Lauren touched Bradley's sleeve, but he pulled his arm away without looking at her. Simone saw it, and something bitter and sad passed through her. Lauren had thought she was sitting beside a king. Now she was sitting beside a man searching for someone else to blame. A board member named Ellen Price adjusted her glasses and spoke carefully. Mr. Mercer, were these materials included in the original investor package? Bradley looked at her as if she had betrayed him. Ellen, this is an ambush. Simone turned toward the board member. No. The ambush was inviting me here to sign away my son's privacy under threat of custody review. She reached into her purse and placed the blue USB on the table. It looked almost silly sitting there, small and scratched, but every eye moved to it. This contains the original files, metadata, email chains, and a recorded call with Bradley's former counsel discussing why my name had to be removed before the first major race. Bradley's voice dropped. Simone, not angry this time. Warning, almost pleading. She looked at him and remembered the courthouse hallway, Caleb's tiny dinosaur in her hand, the way Bradley had walked past her like she had already been deleted. You told them I was emotional, she said. You told them I was uninvolved. You told them I should stay quiet for Caleb. So I did. She pushed the USB toward Julian. But I never agreed to disappear. Julian picked it up and faced the room. Before anyone signs anything today, the board needs to decide whether Mercer Group wants this reviewed privately, responsibly, and immediately, or publicly after the offering documents create a securities problem. Bradley sat back slowly. The power in the room had moved without anyone standing up. Simone could feel it. So could he. And for the first time in 7 years, Bradley Mercer was not controlling the story. He was trapped inside the one Simone had finally chosen to tell. Julian did not play the files like a man chasing drama. He played them like a man building a case. One by one, the documents appeared on the conference room screen, clean, dated, impossible to laugh away. The first was Simone's original launch model, created on a Tuesday night at 1:43 in the morning, back when Mercer Group was still just a name Bradley had scribbled on a paper napkin. The second was a revised version saved 3 days later under Bradley's account, with her name removed and his added. The third was an email chain where Bradley wrote, Simone handled the numbers, I handled the room. Ellen Price leaned closer to the screen, her face pale with the effort of staying professional. The chief financial officer whispered something to the attorney beside him, but no one interrupted. Bradley sat very still now, one hand resting near his water glass, his fingers no longer relaxed. Lauren stared at the screen as if the words were personally insulting her. This proves she helped, Bradley said at last. It does not prove ownership. Simone looked at him. You are right. That is why there is more. Julian clicked again. A recorded call transcript appeared beside an audio file. Bradley's former counsel had spoken on that call years earlier, his voice thin through laptop speakers, but clear enough for every person in the room to hear. He said Simone's contribution was substantial, but adding her to founder records could complicate the story before the race. Then Bradley's younger voice came through, impatient and cold. Investors do not want a husband and wife project. They want me. Clean it up. The room changed after that. Not loudly. No one gasped. No one shouted. But something moved through the table like a draft under a locked door. Simone watched Bradley hear his own voice betray him, and for a moment, she almost felt sorry for the man he used to be, because that man had ruined his future without knowing it. Lauren pushed back from the table. This is disgusting, she said, turning toward Simone. You saved that for years? What kind of person does that? Simone turned to her slowly. The kind who was told nobody would believe her. Lauren opened her mouth, but nothing useful came out. Julian moved to the next file before the silence could soften. This time, the screen showed calendar records, canceled visits with Caleb, text messages from Bradley's assistant apologizing for schedule changes, and the proposed media packet describing Bradley as a hands-on father who built his empire while raising a son. Simone felt her stomach tighten at the sight of Caleb's name in corporate language. Minor child. Family asset. Human-centered narrative. Her boy had once cried because Bradley missed a school concert, and now these people had turned his hurt into a branding opportunity. Ellen Price removed her glasses. Who approved this language? Nobody answered. Simone reached into her purse and pulled out Lauren's message, printed on a single sheet of paper. Julian placed it under the document camera. Do not make this embarrassing. Bradley has moved on. You should too. Lauren's face drained of color. Bradley looked at her then, not with love, not even protection, but irritation, as if her cruelty had become inconvenient. Simone saw Lauren understand it in real time. She had not been chosen because she was special. She had been chosen because Bradley liked women who made his image easier. The public relations manager finally stepped toward the camera. Should I stop recording? Julian looked at Bradley's attorney. That is up to your team. My client did not request the camera. Mr. Mercer did. Bradley's attorney shut his eyes for half a second, the way people do when the mistake is already too expensive to hide. Bradley turned to Simone, his voice lower now. What do you want? There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. A business question from a man who had finally realized the price was no longer his to set. Simone sat back, her hands calm in her lap. I want Caleb's name removed from every campaign. I want the custody threat withdrawn in writing. I want an independent review of Mercer Group's founding records. And I want the board to know that if my work built this company, then my silence helped protect it longer than you deserved. Nobody moved. Outside the glass walls, employees walked past with coffee cups and laptops, unaware that the man whose face hung in the lobby was being unmade by the truth he thought he had buried. Bradley looked around the room for an ally, but every eye that once admired him now measured the risk of standing too close. Simone did not smile. This was not joy. This was not revenge the way Bradley would have imagined it. It was heavier than that. It was a woman finally setting down a burden he had mistaken for weakness. And when Ellen Price quietly said, "We need to suspend this meeting and notify the full board," Bradley closed his eyes, because he knew the meeting he had staged to silence Simone had just become the first official record of his collapse. The room did not empty all at once. It thinned slowly, like people were afraid that leaving too fast would make them look guilty. Ellen Price stepped into the hallway with the chief financial officer and two board attorneys, speaking in low voices that did not carry through the glass. The public relations manager turned off the camera with trembling fingers, then unplugged it, as if the little red light had personally betrayed her. Lauren gathered her purse and stood, but she did not move toward Bradley. She looked at him from the side, her face tight, her confidence gone. You told me she was bitter, Lauren said quietly. Bradley did not answer. You told me she wanted attention. Still nothing. Lauren let out a small, humorless laugh. You did not need a fiancé. You needed a witness who believed your version. Bradley finally looked at her. Not now, Lauren. That was all. Not an apology. Not comfort. Not even embarrassment for what he had dragged her into. Just irritation. Simone watched Lauren understand the role she had played, and for a strange second, the anger between them softened into something almost human. Lauren had been cruel, yes, but Bradley had handed her the script. He had done what he always did. He picked people up, placed them where he needed them, and called it loyalty until they became inconvenient. Lauren walked out without looking back. Bradley stayed seated at the head of the table, but the chair no longer fit him the same way. His shoulders had dropped. His watch still shined. His suit still looked expensive, but the power around him had peeled away, and without it, he looked smaller than Simone remembered. Julian closed the final folder and spoke to Simone in a low voice. We can leave now. The board will contact us by end of day. Simone nodded, but Bradley stood before she could reach for her purse. Can I talk to her alone? Julian looked at Simone, not Bradley. Only if you want to. That choice alone nearly broke something open in her. For years, rooms had decided things around her. Lawyers, judges, executives, Bradley. Now the decision waited for her voice. Simone looked at Julian and said, "Give me 2 minutes." When the door closed, Bradley walked to the window and stared out at Chicago like the city might offer him a line he could use. I never thought it would get this far, he said. Simone stayed seated. That is because you never thought I would. He turned back. His face had changed. Not fully humbled, not fully honest, but shaken enough for the mask to slip. I was under pressure back then. The company was everything. Investors wanted a certain image. I made choices I thought I had to make. Simone looked at him for a long moment. She could still see the younger man in pieces, the one laughing at their kitchen table, the one crying when Caleb was born, the one who once promised everyone would know what she did. That made it worse, not better. You did not have to erase me, she said. Bradley swallowed. I know. You did not have to use our son. His eyes dropped then. Finally. I know. Simone stood, slow and steady, and picked up her purse. Her hand brushed the edge of the blue USB, but she did not need to touch it anymore. The truth was no longer hidden in a shoebox. It had air now. It had witnesses. Bradley took one step toward her, careful, almost afraid of sounding like himself. Simone, I am sorry. For 7 years, she had imagined those words. Sometimes in traffic. Sometimes while folding Caleb's shirts. Sometimes at 2 in the morning when another article called Bradley brilliant and left her nameless. She had thought an apology would feel like rain after a drought. Instead, it felt small. Late. Barely enough to cover the floor between them. No, she said softly. You are scared. He looked wounded, but she did not rush to protect him from that. She had done enough protecting. You are not sorry because you hurt me, Bradley. You are sorry because everyone finally saw it. His mouth opened, then closed. No speech came. No argument. No clever founder answer. Simone walked toward the door, and he said her name once. Not like a husband, not like a man in control, but like someone watching the elevator leave without him. She paused with her hand on the handle. Caleb is not part of your comeback story, she said. He is a child. My child. Your son. Start acting like that matters when nobody is filming. Then she opened the door and stepped into the hallway where Julian waited. Behind her, Bradley remained in the room he had built to make her feel small, surrounded by flowers, folders, and the silence he had finally earned. 3 weeks later, Mercer Group announced a temporary leadership change in a press release so carefully worded it sounded like nobody had done anything wrong. Bradley Mercer would step away from day-to-day operations while the board completed an independent review. The public offering was delayed. His interviews disappeared from the company website. The giant portrait in the lobby stayed up for a few more days, then quietly came down before Monday morning. Simone heard the news from Julian while she was standing in line at a neighborhood bakery with Caleb, waiting for 2 cinnamon rolls and a small coffee. The board accepted your terms, Julian said over the phone. Caleb's name is removed from all campaign materials. Custody threats withdrawn in writing. Founder records under review. And Simone, they want to discuss formal recognition of your contribution. Simone looked through the bakery window at Caleb, who was outside trying to catch a falling leaf before it hit the sidewalk. Formal recognition, she repeated, almost to herself. Julian's voice softened. You earn more than that. She smiled a little, but there was no victory dance inside her, no sudden burst of joy that made the years vanish. That was the thing people did not understand about finally being believed. It did not give you back the nights you cried quietly in the bathroom so your child would not hear. It did not return the birthdays Bradley missed or the interviews where Simone became invisible. It did not heal everything. It simply put the truth back where the lie had been standing. Thank you, Julian, she said, for believing the paperwork before the world believed me. No, he said. Thank yourself for keeping it. After they hung up, Caleb ran inside with cold cheeks and a grin. Mom, did something good happen? Simone tucked her phone into her coat pocket. Yes, she said. Something fair happened. He thought about that while the cashier boxed their rolls. Is fair the same as happy? The question stayed with her. She paid, took the warm paper bag, and walked with him toward the car. The air smelled like rain and sugar and early winter. Not always, she said. Sometimes fair comes first, and happy takes its time catching up. Caleb nodded like that made perfect sense, because children often understand truth better when adults stop decorating it. That Saturday, they ate breakfast at their kitchen table, the same little table where Simone had once worked until sunrise, building a future another man claimed as his own. Caleb covered his roll in too much icing, and Simone pretended not to notice. Her phone buzzed beside her coffee. A message from Bradley. Can we talk? She stared at it for a moment. Her hand did not shake. Her throat did not close. There was no rush of old longing. No need to answer just to prove she was kind. Across from her, Caleb was telling a story about a kid at school who thought Chicago pizza was better than New York pizza, and somehow that mattered more than Bradley's timing. Simone turned the phone face down. "What do you think?" she asked. "Deep dish wins," Caleb said, offended she even had to ask. Simone laughed, and the sound filled the apartment in a way silence never had. Later that afternoon, she went to the Harbor Row office alone. The space was still modest, a few desks, a coffee maker that made strange noises, plants on the windowsills, sunlight spilling across the floor. But to Simone, it felt bigger than any boardroom Bradley had ever used to make her feel small. On her desk sat the new agreement from Whitaker Equity Partners, giving Harbor Row funding to expand into 5 more cities. At the bottom, where her signature belonged, her name was printed clearly. Simone Whitaker. Not former wife. Not silent partner. Not footnote. Just her name. She signed slowly, not because she hesitated, but because some moments deserve to be felt all the way through. Outside, Chicago moved on, loud and ordinary, carrying millions of private heartbreaks no headline would ever explain. Simone stood by the window and watched the city lights blink awake, thinking about the woman she had been in the courthouse hallway, holding a little dinosaur and swallowing words that would have burned the room down. She wished she could go back and tell that woman the silence was not the end. It was a shelter. It was a place to gather strength. It was not weakness unless she never came out of it. And she had come out. Not bitter. Not broken. Not begging to be chosen. She had come out carrying her son, her work, her proof, and the kind of dignity no one could steal unless she handed it over. Some people mistake quiet women for empty rooms. They speak over them, build on top of them, rename what they created, and call it success. But silence can remember. Silence can study. Silence can protect what matters until the day truth walks into the room, sets one small envelope on the table, and changes everything without raising its voice.